Everyone, I'm here with J.R. Briggs. J.R. is founding director of Kairos Partnerships and also the author of The Art of Asking Better Questions. J.R., how you doing? Welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this, Marcus.
Yeah. J.R., tell us briefly what you do.
So as you mentioned, the founding director of Kairos Partnerships. Before that, I was a pastor for over a decade, mega churches, church plants, house church networks. But Kairos Partnerships helps leaders who are feeling stuck, ill-equipped, and overwhelmed to be able to lead with health, clarity, and confidence. And so we do that through coaching, consulting, speaking, writing, and I've got a team of people. We also do spiritual direction. So we just want leaders to be healthy because, as we know, leadership and ministry can be overwhelming and lonely, and we don't want any leader who does not have a companion or an equipper along in that process.
That's great. Oh, I love that. I love that. And I bet in the work that you do, you ask a lot of questions in your coaching. So we're going to talk about questions today. So let me just start with this question. Why do questions matter? Why do we need to ask questions?
Yeah, we could answer this theologically, we could answer this relationally, we could answer this even neurologically. Maybe we'll start with the neurological side of things. It's fascinating when neuroscientists hook our brains up with nodules and nodes, and what they find is that when someone is given information, their brain lights up a little bit, but when someone is asked a question, your brain lights up like fireworks. There's something that happens. In fact, neuroscientists call this that when someone is asked a question, their brain is hijacked. So if I were to ask, what color are your shoes right now? Every listener, whether we realize it or not, for a moment thought, what are the color of my shoes? And so what happens is it's so powerful that our brains have been wired that questions are so important because it draws us in. It forces us to be a participant to what has been expressed to us. Heather Holleman, who teaches at Penn State, she said, the point of a question is for either clarity or engagement. And I really like that. Clarity, information, but engagement could be connection or new ideas or creativity. And so I think we all inherently know that questions are important. I don't think we know how powerful they are and how neglected they are in our culture today. And so the point of this is to try to bring out the power and the potential of questions to their rightful place.
That's great. But we're not always very good at asking questions. Talk about that. Why are we not good at asking questions? What makes it hard?
There are several obstacles that exist of why questions are hard, especially in our culture today. The first one is we live in an attention-seeking age right now. Charles Derber is a sociologist up in Boston, and he called it, we're just addicted to conversational narcissism, where we say, enough about me, what about you? What do you think about me? Right? That there's this sense of the arrows in our culture are always pointing toward the self, the individual. But I think we also fall to the trap of expertise where we think we already know the answer. So why would I ask? And we have to be very careful about that. In a culture that worships efficiency, questions are often seen as inefficient and slow us down in a productivity-oriented world. We also just have a lack of curiosity, partly because it hasn't been modeled well. It takes deliberate practice. It can be exhausting. But we also erroneously assume that people don't want to be asked. And sometimes people don't. But I think we assume, and in an age of incredible loneliness, of which the former Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, he said, we have an epidemic right now of loneliness. And I believe connection is what's needed. How do you create connection in relationship is often through questions. And I think the last barrier that exists, Marcus, is that there is a fear of awkward interactions. I'm fearful it may make them awkward, or if they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to. And that may happen, but real connection, human to human, happens best when there is trust and a sharing of ideas and experience, and that is often happens through asking questions.
Well, I want to unpack all of that and like why how we can become better question askers. I am curious, how did you get so interested in questions? It's not the kind of thing that people are like, oh, I want to learn about questions more. But so what was it for you? What sparked that for you?
Yeah. Well, number one, questions are ubiquitous, right? They're everywhere. We've all been asked several questions. We all have asked several questions in our
Mm-hmm.
lives. In fact, we all ask questions of ourselves. That inner voice that we have in our head, we may not be able to identify them, but we all ask questions all the time in our head. So
Yeah.
I really believe, and I stand by this, and the whole book can be summarized in one sentence. The
Mm-hmm.
quality of your life will be determined by the quality of the questions that you ask God, yourself, and others.
Mm.
And I really believe that. So I want to live a life of quality.
Yeah.
I've got one life and I want to make it count. And I
Yeah.
know others do too.
Yeah.
And if we can understand the power and the possibility of the questions we ask, not just the quantity, but the quality of the questions we ask, it opens up new doors and new possibilities.
Yeah.
So that's on a sort of maybe a more theoretical or academic side of things. But I grew up in a home. My parents were and are still wonderful, but my dad modeled questions so well. I watched my dad as he interacted with my mom and my brother and myself. I watched my dad interact with neighbors and coworkers and people in our church. And I began to notice, wow, these are fascinating conversations. People feel cared about and cared for by my dad.
Mm-hmm.
There's trust being built. And I just was able to watch that as a kid and say, man, life is much more engaging and interesting and fascinating by just watching my dad and pull out stories and have people feel really loved and cared for. And so I grew up with that model and began to say, as I look around, the most interesting people that I know as well are those that are asking good questions. And the people that live small lives, uninteresting lives, lives where their errors are pointing inward just toward themselves, they're not asking any questions.
Yeah.
And I don't want to live like that. And so beginning to notice some of these coming together. And then in my own life of realizing, man, I'm getting in great conversations if I can push myself to ask better questions. It's amazing how people feel cared for, ministered to, encouraged. But I do too.
Yeah.
I feel encouraged and cared for when people do that with me.
Yeah.
So it's the confluence of all those coming together
Yeah.
is what made me say, this is an important topic. I want to, answers are important. I want to raise questions to the same level of answers of their importance.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I love that. Did you intentionally practice? Were there places or sort of like contexts in which you're like, okay, here's my question asking practicing time or something like that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, several areas where I have practiced and continue to practice, even some new practices I've picked up since writing the book that I'm trying out right now. But just like getting better at playing the violin or lifting weights at the gym, you have to continue to do it, and you don't start on the weight bench, with 300 pounds. You can start with the 10-pound barbell or the dumbbell. And that for me was very helpful to just say, can I push myself? So I would do things like when I heard a good question, I would write it down. Yeah. I think there's this pressure. We've got to come up with all the brilliant questions ourselves. We don't.
Yeah.
So I heard it waiting in line at the coffee shop to order my coffee. I just overheard something. That's a great question. I'd write it down. Or on a podcast, on the radio, on a billboard, in a book. Everywhere. I just being aware of them. So try to push myself to just collect great, thoughtful questions. Number one. Number two, I tried to play a game with myself where I don't tell other people I'm playing this game. But when I ask a question in a conversation, can I get them to say, well, that's a great question. Or, I've never been asked that before. Or, I'd have to think about that. Can I get back to you? Because that's really thoughtful. And so I'd play a little game with myself to push myself in that. Yeah. So there are all sorts of creative practices, many of which I put in the back third of the book, if people wanted to grow in that. But those are some practices that anybody can do. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. It's very little energy. It
Yeah.
just takes 5 or 10% more intention
Yeah.
to be able to push ourselves to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It made me think of, I haven't studied questions in the way that you have, although I read your book. And so now I kind of have a little bit. I've learned a little bit anyway. But you know, for me, just kind of reflecting back to you, there was a season of my life in which I was driving for Lyft,
Mhm.
like not Uber, but for Lyft anyway. And, and it became kind of like a game for me, gamified a little bit, where
Yeah,
I wanted to see
great.
how much can I draw out of this person, not in a weird way, but just like how much conversation and what's the next question I can ask to just kind of learn a little bit more. And it was fascinating because I loved it.
Mhm.
I learned to meet. I mean, I got to know so many. Obviously, only for 20 minutes at a time, but I got to know all these people that I would never have met because our paths would never have crossed. But they did because
Yeah.
I was, driving them somewhere, and I would learn all kinds of things about all kinds of people. And then sometimes you're right. Sometimes people didn't want to talk. And
Mhm.
sometimes they'd say, I just want to, I'm texting somebody right now or whatever,
Yeah, which is
no
fine.
problem.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Yep.
Totally fine.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, but it's amazing how people really do want to engage when they're asked rich, meaningful questions.
Mhm.
And it doesn't start with, super deep questions, just like, hey, you know, how's your day? Where are you going? What are you up to today? And then, you find your little strategies. At least this was my experience.
Mhm.
What do you do for a living? These are, oh, okay. So these are the different levels of questions. Talk about
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I realized, and I worked on this in my Doctor of Ministry degree. My dissertation, my thesis was on equipping leaders to ask better questions.
Mm-hmm.
And in the research of that, I found that not all questions are created equal. I think we know that inherently, but then what is the difference? And I found
Mm-hmm.
that there are these 4 levels of good questions. Level 1 being questions for information. And Marcus, you mentioned a couple of those already, like where are you going, and
Mm-hmm.
what are you up to today? Those are
Mm-hmm.
just simple facts that you can ask a stranger who jumped in your car, and
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
creepy, it's not awkward, it's transactional, it's straightforward with clear answers, and you can ask a stranger that, and it won't be awkward.
Yeah.
But level 2 requires a little bit more context there. These are
Mm-hmm.
questions for interaction, not just information.
Mm-hmm.
So, where we're opening ourselves up to share a little bit of ourselves with some thoughts and emotions. So,
Mm-hmm.
this requires a little bit of relational context and trust, and it engages some of those thoughts and emotions where it might be like, so, how are you feeling today going into that meeting with your boss?
Yeah.
Or when did you first become interested in running
Mm.
marathons?
Mm-hmm.
I've got to know some context about them. Oftentimes, follow up questions can be a thoughtful level 2.
Yep.
But the next level there is level 3 questions, which are questions for understanding. This is where we're going another layer down of feelings and desires,
Mm-hmm.
hopes, dreams, disappointments. It might be, what do you really want in life? Or what are
Mm-hmm.
some of your deepest fears as you think about your children
Yeah.
um, and their future? So you
Mm.
need emotional context and trust with people at level 3.
Mm.
And then there's
Mm.
level 4. Level 4 are the most vulnerable. These are questions
Yeah.
for transformation. And so it's capital V vulnerability,
Yeah.
where you might have relationship with just a handful of people in your life. It could be
Yeah.
a pastor, it could be a spouse, a best friend for 30 years, a
Mm-hmm.
therapist, a spiritual director,
Mm-hmm.
where you can plumb the depths of human experience with someone by asking questions like,
Mm-hmm.
when do you feel most fully seen? Or
Yeah.
what are you afraid to tell me right now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or when do you feel rejected? And what
Yeah.
lies are you tempted to believe in the midst of
Yeah.
that rejection? So
Yeah.
it's reserved for this small circle of our closest relationships. But
Yeah.
I find if you can identify levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 in our lives and in our
Mm-hmm.
conversations, it can help us be better at asking questions. So
Yeah.
when someone gets in your car, Marcus,
Yeah.
with Lyft level 1,
Yeah.
absolutely. By the end, it may be inappropriate because you've only met them for 20 minutes to
Uh-huh.
ask a level 4.
Yeah.
But my guess is you probably sensed with wisdom
Mm-hmm.
where there was enough trust to move to
Yeah.
level 2 and
Yeah.
maybe to level 3 from time to time.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. It is interesting. Obviously, not everyone every conversation went to level 3, but there were some. And
Mhm.
sometimes I even dropped them off and said a prayer with them, for
Yeah.
whatever it was that they were going through. And that only happened a handful of times with people who were comfortable with that,
Mhm.
but it was kind of beautiful.
Yeah.
The other thing is that I learned is it doesn't help if you ask with judgment. You know what I mean?
Mm. Mhm.
So maybe that's about curiosity.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned 4 sort of essentials. You talk about curiosity, wisdom, humility, and courage, and asking with those sort of postures, I guess. Unpack that for us. What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, these 4 essentials or these 4 pillars are so crucial. The first one may seem obvious, but it still needs to be named.
Hmm.
You can't ask a question unless there's some sort of curiosity, at least a
Mm-hmm.
healthy question. You can ask a
Mm-hmm.
question of judgment, as you said. But if I can have a posture of curiosity instead of judgment, instead
Mm-hmm.
of, well, that's weird. Well, they're strange.
Yeah.
But instead of, I wonder why they
Yeah.
did that. I wonder what's behind that. I
Yeah.
wonder what their motive was in wanting to say that out
Yeah.
loud or
Yeah.
whatever. But curiosity has to be there, number one. Number two, there are so many questions that exist in the world. Uh, we need to learn to ask wise questions that are the right thing to ask at the right time to the right person for the right reason. And I think an important question to ask ourselves before we open our mouths to ask someone else is, what's my motive? And I think it takes a lot of wisdom to identify what our motive is. Is it to sound
Mm.
impressive? Is it to show care and concern? Is it
Mm-hmm.
to be judgmental and inflict some pain or something on someone else? Or is it to genuinely learn something new? So
Mm-hmm.
wisdom is number two. So curiosity, wisdom, humility. If I'm going to ask a question, it means I'm admitting I don't know something.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a lot of humility in our culture. And we're going to have courage, because if we admit we don't know something, we may look unintelligent. So
Mm.
I need to have enough security in my own identity
Yeah.
that even if I look unintelligent,
Mm-hmm.
humility, I still have the courage to ask it,
Yeah.
because it's still important to ask. So it could be lowercase c courage, it could be capital C courage. But
Yeah.
sometimes we know, ooh, I don't know if I'm brave enough to ask that question. I think we've
Yeah.
all thought that ourselves before. But to ask really good questions, we need those 4 pillars of curiosity, wisdom, humility, and courage.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And humility, I'm thinking, I mean, it can be humbling, right? To be the one asking
Absolutely.
questions. Especially if you're a leader, right? So
Mm.
most of
Mhm.
our listeners are pastors or ministry leaders of some kind, and a lot of times we're looked to as the ones who should have all the answers, theologically, culturally, socially, or whatever. What should we do? Pastor, how should I live? One of the things you say is that leaders should be the most curious people on the planet. Why do you say that? And how can curiosity make us better leaders?
Drawing on the research of Jennifer Garvey Berger,
Mm.
she's an author who identified in her studies and her coaching of leaders around the country, she identified 2 key characteristics that distinguish great leaders from good ones. That's a question I like to wrestle with. What's the difference between a good leader and a great one? And she found 2 things in her research. Great leaders amplified others, and they were extremely curious. And so amplification is, David Brooks talks about this, that there are diminishers and there are illuminators. So an illuminator, they bring out the best in people.
Mm.
They're affirming, they're encouraging, they believe in others, they empower and entrust others. They're not cynical of others. They believe the best in them and extend the charitable assumption. So amplification, number one. But curiosity says, I wonder what's going on. I wonder what the context is around that decision. I
Mm.
wonder what's happening here. Why do people seem tense and tight rather than loose right now? What
Mm-hmm.
just changed in the room?
Yeah.
And a lot of that's emotional intelligence, but
Yeah.
to be curious amplifiers is one of the best ways we can be great leaders.
Mm.
And So that's the first one, is just curiosity on that.
Yeah.
But when we're curious, we expand our posture and our willingness to be open to new possibilities. And if leaders are just focused in and our aperture becomes smaller and smaller, I think that limits our opportunity to think creatively in leadership.
Yeah.
I'm not a creative person in terms of writing poetry or paintings or drama. I don't write songs. I can't play an instrument. But I do think about my life as being very creative as a leader, of saying, okay, this is a problem. How are we going to address this?
Yeah.
Okay, this is an issue. How could we cast a vision to call people to a different way of living, rallied around together around a bigger vision than ourselves?
Yeah.
And so if we can be curious, it means we can be creative in that. And curiosity also it empowers other people. It affirms other people.
Yeah.
And leadership is about trust.
Yeah.
The leadership vehicle only runs on trust in the tank. So we can have the most beautiful car in the world, but if we don't have any tank in the gas, gas in the tank, that car isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And so I really believe that the way we build trust is consistency, integrity, and learning to ask thoughtful, intelligent, caring, compassionate, engaging questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it is an expression of love. What's the saying? Or I think you quoted it in your book, that being heard, the experience of being heard or listened to is the same as the experience of being loved. Is that right? Does that sound right?
Yeah. It's that people have a hard time distinguishing the difference.
Yeah.
And I think it was first Teddy Roosevelt who said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah.
That is so true. And so one of the ways you care is extending as an expression of hospitality is asking questions of other people.
Yeah. Yeah. And so as pastors, I just think that's an incredibly valuable skill, just to get to know your people, staff and, lay leaders and, whoever you encounter in your congregation, and people in your community, right? You can't, I don't think you can lead effectively if you don't know your people, if you're not willing to learn along the way, right? If you come in as someone who thinks everyone should listen to me, well, that then doesn't help in terms of building trust. What you're describing a minute ago. I guess I'm just thinking about conversations I've recently had. A guy who was telling me his challenges at work, as our kids were actually they're on the same basketball team, and and so one of someone from our church, and he's like, oh, I'm going through all this, and I just enjoyed the experience of asking him more and more, and he's like, oh, sorry, I'm dumping all of you. I'm like, no, tell me more, I don't mind at all, I love it. So anyway, I guess I'm reflecting on the relationships that can be developed in a church context, just by asking questions, just by saying, tell me more about that. Like, what did that feel like, when you went through that? The other thing that I thought of, in terms of leadership, and pastoring is, questions can help you to not, have a knee-jerk reaction, if you feel challenged in some way. And I've shared this on a couple of other episodes recently. I had someone come up to me and she was visiting the church and said, is this a spirit-filled church? She was asking. I felt like I was being tested. I was like, of course it's a spirit-filled church, so the Holy Spirit is here. And then afterwards I was like, oh, I should have just slowed down and asked a question. What do you mean by that? Tell me more. So anyway, my reflections on, the value of pastoring. Do you have any thoughts on the ability to, slow down in those tense moments, the value of a question in moments of tension? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Oftentimes just simply allowing ourselves to take 3 breaths. and sometimes it's counting to 10, whatever we need to do.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's being able to say, what is going on behind this? This person is obviously
Yeah.
hurting.
Yeah.
I'm very bad at reading people's minds. And
Yeah.
so there are times I'll say something like, I am getting the sense that you're very upset about this.
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, is that true? If not, please correct me. And they go,
Yeah.
yeah, it's true. Do you mind me asking why this is getting you so upset? And so maybe I'm a little bit surprised by how emotional this is for you. Can you tell me what is it that's driving that emotion? Oftentimes there's a story behind the emotion. And so if you can ask them carefully and respectfully where they feel safe enough to share that story, it can be a real beautiful thing. And then we realize we're not really talking about the issue. Now we're talking about perspective and relationship and how you came to where you are today on this issue. And then people feel more loved. But again, it takes time. It's quote unquote inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
And in a productivity oriented world, this is really tough.
Yeah.
And so, Marcus, here's my quote unquote heresy of the month. Jesus was wildly inefficient, but he was incredibly effective.
Yeah.
Now, I say, tongue in cheek, heresy of the month.
Yeah.
But we have to be careful because what do we often do as ministry leaders and as pastors? I want to be as efficient as possible. I don't think that was on Jesus's radar.
Yeah.
Jesus was trying to be as effective as possible, which meant that oftentimes ministry is wildly inefficient. But if done right, with the right motive and trusting the Spirit's work, the slow move of God, that it can be wildly effective. Here you and I are 2 millennia later, marked by the work of Jesus that still exists, even though it was a quote unquote inefficient 3.5 years of earthly ministry.
Right.
And I think we need to think about this with questions because in the short term, it does feel inefficient. But over the long term, it can be incredibly effective if we can have the wisdom to see it.
Yeah. Well, and Jesus asked a lot of questions, which is fascinating. He didn't, he gave answers, but he also just asked a lot of questions. Maybe say something about that, about Jesus's, was it a strategy? Was it a posture? What was that?
Yeah, well, one of the things in the research that I did with this is to realize that Jesus in his teaching, he really attempted to take people on 3 types of field trips. Number one, he took them on physical, literal field trips where, peripatetic ministry, like we're going to learn by walking, right? So he said, look at the birds of the air, look at the lilies of the field. Oh, look at that woman over there who just put 2 mites in the temple treasury.
Yeah.
And he makes a lesson out of it. Not in the classroom, out in the world. So he takes them on literal field trips. Number 2, emotional field trips, where he's telling stories and parables and metaphors. And then the last one are mental field trips. This is where he employs questions in order to provoke thought. And if we're looking for it, we'll see it. But the centrality of Jesus's ministry around questions were fundamental to Jesus's approach. His first recorded words are questions to his parents when he was lost in the temple. His final words on the cross, my God, why have you forsaken me? Even after the resurrection, he continues to ask questions. So I dug in and found that there are over 300 questions asked by Jesus throughout the New Testament. There's also one in the book of Acts. But if you look at that, Jesus was nearly 40 times more likely to ask a question than to give a direct answer. He's the way, the truth, and the life for sure.
Yeah.
But I think we would guess the ratio would be the opposite, that he would be 40 times more likely to give a direct answer than ask a question.
Right.
It's the opposite. They're everywhere. And so I just challenge people, find a red letter edition of your Bible and then circle every red question mark you find in it and then ask, why did he ask it? Who did he ask? And what was the result that happened when Jesus asked this question? So much life change happens when he asks questions.
Yeah. Well, okay. So then bringing it back to ministry leadership, looking at the example of Jesus, if we follow that example, like how would you describe, what would you say in terms of the way it impacts our teaching, our leading, helping people grow in their faith?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, think about the questions that could be done in evangelism, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
evangelism has totally shifted
Mm.
from being about apologetics and rational answers to
Yeah.
people's questions. Now it's more about experience. And are you going to treat me like a jerk? Or are you going to treat me with humility?
Mm.
That often comes out with a posture of asking questions,
Yeah.
right? Discipleship, right? What does it mean to actually follow Jesus? I was just talking with a friend earlier, and he said one question totally changed his whole ministry when he had a ministry leader ask him this question: do you want to impress Christians, or do you want to actually live like Jesus?
Oh.
And for him, that changed the whole trajectory
Yeah.
of his ministry, of
Hmm.
what he felt God had called him to do and to become. And so I think it helps with evangelism, discipleship, even in our preaching.
Mm-hmm.
Even just to go through your manuscript or your notes before a sermon and say, how many questions do I have? Can I actually go through and
Yeah.
circle in my notes?
Mm.
How many questions am I actually asking? And is that ratio similar to how Jesus asked questions in
Mm.
his teachings as well?
Yeah. Yeah.
Take the Sermon on the Mount. I don't have it off the top of my head, but it
Sure.
is in the book, of how many questions he asked in those three chapters.
Mm.
It's astounding. It's
Huh.
astounding. And sometimes those were thoughtful questions. Sometimes they were creative, sometimes even humorous.
Mm-hmm.
And other times they were rhetorical and
Yeah.
direct, and felt a little bit like a like a slap across the face.
Yeah.
All of those were effective tools to get people participating and thinking about a response to who Jesus was.
Yeah.
And I think we can be thinking about that through care, through emphasis, through. I think this is what Tim Keller actually did really well when he was alive and was preaching, of helping people address their idols. He would
Mm.
say, how are those idols doing for you? Is that
Yeah.
working out for you?
Yeah.
And he would do it in a winsome way, even though it was direct, of having people have to be confronted with their
Yeah.
own idols and
Yeah.
say, what if there's something better?
Yeah.
So it touches on every area.
Mm.
In fact, I can't think of a single area of ministry. I can't think of a single area of life where learning to ask better questions
Yeah.
wouldn't enhance the experience, the human experience
Yeah.
itself.
And what a difference, your example of Tim Keller saying, how are your idols working out from you? What a difference from saying your idols are bad. you
Yeah,
know,
correct.
uh,
Correct.
I just don't think people pay attention to those kinds of statements. The way, just and thinking neurologically, the way you started off this conversation, right? It it makes you go, yeah. How are those idols working out for me? Oh, wow,
Yeah,
good
hijack your
question.
brain.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's great. Um, and then there's also the challenge in ministry leadership of just sort of having to adapt to the world and leading change. One of the things that's important in adaptive leadership, which is something we talk a lot about here at the Church Leadership Institute, is
Mhm.
um, helping our churches or our organizations be sort of learning communities. And as leaders, part of our calling then in terms of leading change is to lead the learning of the community. Uh, and when change is involved, we don't have all the answers. I remember when COVID happened, and one of the things I kept thinking about is there's not a single person in the world who can say, well, based on my expertise and experience of the last time I lived through a pandemic, this is what we should do, right? And so, anyway, lots of different opinions on how everything was managed by those who are in charge. But the reality is, when you're going through a season where you don't know what the next thing is or what the next right thing is,
Mhm.
because the world has changed so much. Um, we pastors and leaders, we don't have the answers, and so we have to lead the learning. So maybe I'm just thinking about questions and how we can ask questions of our congregations when it comes to helping them be a learning community. Any thoughts on that?
The late leadership guru, Peter Drucker, he made an observation, crucial insight. He said, the leader of the past may have been the person who knew how to tell, but certainly the leader of the future will be the person who knows how to ask. And he said that a few decades ago. And think about post-COVID, even when we were in COVID, you're exactly right. Nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
But I think those who asked the best questions were the ones that actually led well. Questions of ourselves, like, what do I need in this moment?
Yeah.
What do I know to be true? There's so much I don't know to be true. What is it I actually do know to be true? How can I deepen trust with my team? What does my team need from me right now? Where can I be more involved? Where can I get out of my own way? How can I get out of their way? So these are really wise questions that the best leaders through the pandemic that I saw asking in their leadership roles. Number one. Number two, questions we're asking God, I mean, God, what's going on? God, what do you want from me? And to have an open posture to say, we don't know, we need adaptive leadership. We don't know what the future looks like. We don't even know what tomorrow looks like. But Lord, we want to hear from you. So Lord, would you make that known to us? So much of our prayers, so many of our prayers are actually asking questions as well, right? Ask and you shall receive. What is Jesus saying? Ask questions. Be in an inquiry mode when it comes to your interaction with me. And then also of others, of asking, what do you need right now? What are you feeling right now? How can I serve you in such a way through this uncertainty that would be helpful? What does it mean to flourish in this season, even when everything feels like it's on fire? Imagine what if we tried, what if we could, right? Then it becomes a spirit of dreaming. One of my favorite adaptive leadership questions is to say, there's so much that we focus on with learning. What do we need to unlearn in this season?
Good.
We focus a lot on that, but I think so much of adaptive leadership is letting go, right? As Todd would say in Canoeing the Mountains, I got to let go of the canoe and the paddles now because there ain't no water on this mountain. And so unlearning means letting go of the paddles because the canoeing days are over. So what do we need to unlearn? What will that cost us? And then how can we support each other even as it costs us to let go of these things that we treasured and we were experts on in the past that we'll no longer need moving forward?
Yeah, that's great. Those are good questions. And I agree. If we can ask those kinds of questions, and in context, I don't know if you have any thoughts. Like, I mean, in our preaching, I suppose, in our
absolutely
one-on-one conversations, in our board meetings, any thoughts in terms of like contexts in which we can ask those kinds of questions, just to sort of help people really come along in that process.
Sure. Well, I think the most important one we can use in our communication would be the rhetorical question. And often people say, well, we shouldn't ask leading questions. I would actually distinguish it a little bit of what I call guiding questions. Leading questions, I think, are oftentimes unhelpful and an attempt to control. But guiding questions, I think Paul did this throughout the book of Romans. I mean, you see this over and over again. Shall we sin so that grace shall abound even more? Of course not. And so he's basically asking the question to guide people where his thought process is going and then answer it. And I think attorneys do that well. They often will ask a question, then answer it, or ask a rhetorical question. Like I mentioned, the Keller quote, how are your idols working out for you? Now that's rhetorical. He's not wanting somebody to raise their hand in the middle of a service and ask that. But sometimes there are churches that do a talkback time, during the Sunday school hour after the sermon to say, hey, bring your questions about the text, about the sermon. Let's unpack this together. And so I think if we can do all we can in our churches to normalize questions. And Marcus, let me differentiate this between questioning and question asking. I'm not encouraging people to increase their doubt. What I am, so not in a questioning of authority or authority of Scripture, but of question asking. If we can create a safe environment for people to ask questions, that only serves everyone well.
Yeah.
That's only to benefit the congregation, because everyone has questions about faith, about God, about doubt, about the scripture,
Yeah.
about salvation, about heaven, all these things. Do we have a safe enough space where people can actually voice what's in their heads?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And let me just say that I finished reading your book earlier this week, and I was inspired for our board meetings, for instance, our session meetings.
Mhm.
We do some sort of group lectio at the beginning of our meetings, and I posed simple questions like, what do you see, what do you notice, what gets your attention, but
Mhm.
it did get me to think, what maybe I can develop one good guiding question,
Mm.
just to uh, I mean, people don't have to focus on that, but just something to help draw out whatever it might be, because sometimes people need that, I think, to, right, again, neurologically, to trigger, oh yeah, what is that? So anyway, I just want to say personally, thanks for
Mm.
that inspiration from this book, and I
Mm.
think there are all kinds of applications for what you talk about in this book, asking the art of asking better questions. So thank you. I just want to say
Mm.
thank you for that. Um, all right, now before we finish, you had offered before we hit record to turn the tables and maybe give us an example of some good questions being asked. So
Mm.
go ahead. I'll turn it to you and let you do some question asking.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I
Yeah.
love asking questions, and I can tell, Marcus, you're very good at asking questions. You're thoughtful about it. And I'm sure other guests have benefited from that. I certainly have. So,
Mm,
yeah, let me just ask you a couple questions. So, I'm
yeah.
curious, is there a question or some questions that someone has asked you at some point in your life that has had significant implications for you?
Oh
Maybe it made
gosh.
you think differently, or take a job or not take a position somewhere, or
Mm,
yeah, just
mm.
curious if anybody asked a question that stuck with you that has had some implications on your life.
Um, Here's what comes to mind. When I was in college, I was involved in Campus Crusade for Christ, and one of our leaders asked the group, "Do you put on the full armor of God?"
Mm,
And it
mm.
it made me go like, and then he said, I mean, not literally, but like, do you actually think about that? Do you actually think about putting on the full armor of God? And I was just like, wow, what a great question. And I didn't
That
say
is a great
anything.
question.
And so, but that actually kicked off a practice for me that I've been doing since I was like 20, 21, 22 years old, where every morning I
Wow.
just kind of say, okay, Lord, I'm putting on my helmet of salvation, and
Uh,
thanks for rescuing me. Put on my breastplate of righteousness. Thank you for giving me a righteousness. Anyway, so I just kind of, usually while I'm in the shower, or while I'm on my first drive of the day, whatever it might be, but just sort of this practice of putting on the full armor of God every day, and it's been a formative thing for me. Yeah,
that
yeah,
is a fantastic question
yeah,
that somebody asked you. And what a wonderful story.
yeah.
And here's the beautiful thing about that. Not only did that person in crew, Campus Crusade for Christ,
Hmm.
ask you that and impacted you,
Hmm.
now it's in my head. And I'm
Oh,
thinking about that question and that
yeah,
story and going, ooh,
yeah,
am I putting the full armor of God on every day?
yeah,
So, anyway, just the power of a question, it keeps
yeah.
rippling here.
I
That's
love it.
fantastic.
I love it.
Um, I'm curious, Marcus, you clearly ask good questions. You're very thoughtful,
Uh-huh.
and thank you for the gift that you've
Mm.
given to me of
Uh-huh.
asking really good questions. Um, where did that come from? How did you come to become so good at asking good questions yourself?
Oh boy. Well, thank you. I try. And I will say part of it actually came from driving Lyft. I did that before I started, or around even while I was first doing the podcast. Um, I think that's when I think I got better at asking questions. I think I probably asked half decent questions prior to that, but really, it really did become intentional. Like I wanted to, and you know what, and as I was driving Lyft, I was, so here's the interesting thing. I did it in a time when I needed the money. We were kind of in a challenging place financially, and it was a little bit embarrassing at first. I'm like, I can't
Mm,
believe I have to do this rideshare thing in order to make ends meet. But
mm,
it just within a few months, I was like, man, I love this.
mm,
Because
mm,
it became a ministry. And
Mhm.
so really my goal became, how do I love the person that I'm driving right now, And
Love it.
the way I was able to do that was by asking questions. And people would sometimes share things that I couldn't believe they were sharing with me, um, family issues, addiction issues, whatever, all kinds of challenges. And like I said, sometimes I got to even pray with someone if they were, usually if they were a follower of Jesus and, were open to that. Uh, but my hope was that that I would make them feel loved by the
Mm,
time that they got out of the car. And so I think in some ways, well, I mean, it's a little bit different in a podcast, but I hope that my guests feel somewhat loved, through the conversation. But certainly, I think that's become part of the overall goal of my life and my conversations. Like, how do I help this person feel loved in
mm,
this
mm.
conversation? Yeah.
That's great. Marcus, I hear you saying, first of all, you're curious.
Mm,
Number two, you want to really care
mm,
for people. And number three, you then had an environment where you could practice that
yeah.
when you were driving around with Lyft,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is fantastic. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing that. That
Yeah.
makes total sense.
Yeah.
That's terrific. You mentioned that you have interviewed a lot of different leaders on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, how have you personally grown and how are you different now than
Oh.
before you started the podcast
Mm-hmm.
with all of these conversations you've been a part of?
That's a great question. um, I chuckled because you said that's part of what you want to. One of your goals is to get out of a question. Yeah, how have I changed? Um, Man, that's a great question. Because I have. I'm trying to find the right words for that. I think for one thing is, well, it's given me a lot of new friends. I mean, at least people that I have passing acquaintance with, and some have become uh, more than that, like just ongoing acquaintances and friends. And so that's been a gift, and that has brought me joy. And also, I guess you could say it's given me a more confidence.
Mm,
Um, Okay, here's one of the things. Man, I love learning. I love learning. Um, and I love that I am able to use this to share that with other people.
mm,
So how's it changed me? How's it changed me? I mean, that's not so much a change. Um, but it's given me sort of a joy and um, did I say the confidence already? Confidence that this is
mm,
something that I've been gifted to do, which is not something I knew before. It started as an
mm,
experiment. It was something that I was like, I kind of want to do a podcast, and I think I want it to be about this, um, and then to see that, wow, it's working, so it just sort of, it has, I guess it has given me, okay, thank you, now I'm coming to it. It's given me more of a sense of who I am, how I've been
mm,
gifted, what I
mm.
have to contribute to the world. And I don't have to say that with pride, but with joy, that the gift that God has given to me that I get to give to the world. So finding a security um, and a peace in that is the way that I have been changed. There you go. Whew.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing. You
Yeah.
mentioned, can I ask you maybe just a few more
Sure.
before I
Yeah.
turn it
Go for
back
it.
over to you?
Go for it.
Because I'm learning a lot about you, and I
Yeah.
love to see the joy that comes out. You mentioned the word joy, and
Mm.
I'll be honest with you, joy does not come easily to me, and
Mm.
so I've had to really wrestle with the question of what are the joy blockers in my life,
Mm.
and often asking what are the joy blockers in this season of my life.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I know this is maybe a level 3, maybe a level
Whew.
3 plus
Yeah.
type question, but I'm curious if you feel comfortable sharing, Marcus,
Uh
and if you
huh.
don't, it's okay. But what are some joy blockers that often are involved in your life that keep you from experiencing more joy?
Oh boy. Well, sometimes it's people. Certain people can be joy blockers.
I think every pastor on this
Uh-huh.
podcast can totally agree with you. What
Yep.
we call EGRs, extra grace
That's
required
right. That's
people,
right.
right?
That's
So
right. And sometimes I don't have all that extra grace. So people can be joy blockers. Um, well, stress comes to mind. My parents are aging, and so
Mm,
that's required a lot from me in the last few years. And of course, I love them, and I am more than happy to care for them. But there have been times over the last few years where it's been almost more than what I felt like I could handle in
mm,
terms of anyway the care that they needed in within a given 2 or 3 week period, for instance.
mhm.
It's just like, and it just pulled so much out of me to where by the end of it, I was just like, oh, I can't. I don't know how I can do this again next time. So in this season, is it a joy blocker? Well, I guess kind of. It can feel like a joy blocker at times, just because it creates so much anxiety at times.
Mm,
But anyway,
mm.
for me right now, that's one of the hard things, at least. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know that takes some vulnerability to share, and I really
yeah,
appreciate that, and I'm sure your listeners do as well.
yeah.
I wonder if there's one more question I can ask you before I turn it over to you, and that's you started this podcast in 2018. You
Hmm.
partnered with Fuller on this.
Yeah.
You've grown personally a lot in this. I'm curious, looking to the future, what's your dream for this podcast in the days ahead?
Mm.
What keeps you going at it?
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, and I'm gonna share something that I had Todd Bolsinger on. Actually, he will have been the full length episode just prior to this one that we're doing now. Um, Church Leadership Institute. Okay, so let me give some context. Church Leadership Institute was funded by a 5-year grant from the Lilly Foundation, and that 5 years is coming to an end at the end of this year. And so my partnership with Church Leadership Institute will also come to an end at the end of this year, and that's okay. So I have loved being a part of the Church Leadership Institute for the past, as of today, about 4.5 years. Um, um, and I love working with Todd and some of the others on the staff, and it has been a joy, and and I'm okay with that kind of coming to a close. We all kind of knew it would probably come to a close after this 5-year period, and so emotionally and mentally, I've been ready for that conclusion for the last 6 months or more. And it's given me an opportunity to think about, okay, what's next for the podcast? Because I'm not planning to stop doing the podcast, um, and it will still it will still be focused on ministry leadership and emotional and spiritual health for leaders. Um, but I'm wondering, what else could I do, or is there a format change? Do I want to do more like topical conversations, maybe with panels? I don't know. And so anyway, so I've been thinking about what might be next. And so let me just mention for folks, I think early in the 2026, January, February, I might invite folks to come join a Zoom call with me, just to give me your thoughts and ideas for what's next for the podcast. So I'm actually feeling pretty good, pretty excited about what's next. I don't know exactly what it will look like, but my hope, my goal is that pastors and ministry leaders would continue to um, become, to whatever extent that the podcast can help, become leaders of shalom, right?
Mm,
Leaders who are formed as people of shalom, right? People who bring God's healing and wholeness into the world, and who lead their churches and organizations to be communities of shalom, also experiencing the shalom, the healing, the well-being of God, and sharing that with the world, bringing God's shalom into the world. Um, So that's kind of like my long-term or overarching goal for this podcast, is just to help pastors and ministry leaders experience the shalom of God and share the shalom of God.
I
There
love
you
that.
go.
That's
Yeah.
inspiring. Yeah,
Oh,
appreciate that.
good.
And thank you for letting me ask you
Yeah.
questions. I know that may be new or different, but I learned a
Yeah.
great deal, and hopefully your listeners did as well. So thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me to put down the
Yeah.
reverse Uno card on the
Yeah.
table here. So
I love it. Well, thank you for asking me those questions. Those are good. Those are some hard questions. Some of them I was like, oh gosh, give me a day to think about that one. But but it came out right. It was all in there, and the questions drew something out of me that maybe I didn't even know was there to come out. So that's the power of a question. I love that. I love that.
yeah. Yeah, there's a word, if I could,
Yeah.
there's a word,
Mm-hmm.
educe. We
Mm.
often think of reduce, but educe is this idea of drawing out something that was hidden or waking up
Mm.
something that was latent and
Mm-hmm.
pulling it out of someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the word educe means. And originally that's where we got our word education.
Oh
Now that
yeah.
has been bastardized and changed over the years to mean open up brain, dump in information, close brain.
Mm.
But an educator was an educer originally,
Mm.
to draw out what was inside of this young student and
Mm.
to wake it up, almost like we're taking billows and just blowing it on a fire to see that
Mm.
fire rage more and more. So good questions are
Mm.
educing tools that help us
Yeah.
bring out what is already in there,
Mm.
to uncover what has been hidden, and to wake up what has been latent.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. I love that. That is a great final word for our for our conversation today. JR, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for a great book, The Art of Asking Better Questions. Did I get that right? Yes.
Yes.
The Art
Yeah.
of Asking Better Questions. And also thanks for asking me a few questions too. That was a lot of fun. So JR, thank you. Really appreciate you.
Well, this was a lot of fun, and keep asking questions. You're doing a great job, Marcus, and I hope your listeners will be inspired to ask better questions moving forward as well.